This isn't a bus ticket, kid. First class is for people who actually matter." Those words were the last thing Elaine said before making the biggest mistake of her career. She believed she was simply putting a troublemaker in his place. What she didn't realize was that the boy standing in front of her, the one wearing the hoodie, had the power to ground an entire airline fleet with a single text message. So when the captain suddenly slammed on the brakes midway down the runway and turned the plane around, passengers gasped in confusion. Elaine, on the other hand, went pale. This wasn't a mechanical issue or a routine delay. The pilot wasn't turning back for the plane, he was turning back to fire her. Watch until the end to see one of the most brutal examples of instant karma aviation has ever seen. Inside JFK's locations, B places JFK, John F. Kennedy International Airport, Liberty International Airport Terminal B. The air felt heavy, filled with the smell of expensive coffee and the low murmur of high-stakes business conversations. This area was the exclusive lounge for Apex Skies Airlines, a carrier that took pride in serving only the top 1%. Working for Apex Skies wasn't just employment, it was a symbol of status, and no one wore that status more boldly than Elaine. She adjusted her silk scarf and scanned the line of passengers with sharp focus, her eyes moving like a predator searching for weakness. As the senior purser for flight RH-88 to Paris, Charles de Gaulle, she viewed the first-class cabin as her personal territory. She had an internal checklist for who belonged there: tailored suits, Patek Philippe watches, and the unmistakable bored look of old money. Anyone who didn't meet those standards was made aware of it immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Whitman," she said smoothly, flashing a polished smile at a silver-haired man holding a platinum card. "Seat 2A is ready for you. Champagne is already on ice." "Charming as always, Elaine," he replied with a nod. As soon as he passed, her smile disappeared. In an instant, the mood at the podium shifted from welcoming to cold. Standing in front of her now was a boy who couldn't have been more than 19. He was black, tall, and dressed in an oversized gray hoodie, loose basketball shorts, and worn retro Jordans. Large headphones rested around his neck, and a lained-up duffel bag hung over one shoulder. To Elaine, he looked like someone who had taken a wrong turn on the way to a National Express station. He didn't speak. He simply placed his boarding pass on the marble counter. Elaine didn't bother looking at it. Instead, she glanced at his shoes, then his hoodie, and finally his face. She let out a short, disbelieving huff, half laugh, half sigh. "Sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "you're in the wrong place. Economy boards at gate 45. This is the priority lane, first class only." The boy, Marcus, didn't react. His eyes were calm, intelligent, and tired. "I know," he said evenly. "I'm on this flight." Elaine rolled her eyes, making sure the passengers behind him noticed her irritation. She picked up the boarding pass between two fingers as if it were dirty. A quick glance was all she expected, some seat number buried deep in economy. Instead, her expression tightened. "Passenger Jaden Hale. Seat 1A. Status VIP." Seat 1 was the owner's suite, the most expensive and private seat on the plane, usually reserved for celebrities or diplomats. Elaine laughed loudly, the sharp sound drawing attention. "Okay, this is actually funny," she said, tossing the boarding pass back at him. It slid off the counter and landed on the floor. "Where did you get this? Did you print it online? Or steal it from your daddy's wallet?" Marcus bent down and picked it up slowly. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. "I bought the ticket," he said. "It's real. You can scan it." "I'm not scanning a fake ticket," Elaine snapped, her expression hardening. "And I'm not holding up my line for a joke." She motioned toward a security officer nearby. "We have zero tolerance for fraud. Walk away now, or I'll have you banned from the airline." "Check the system," Marcus said, his voice firmer now. "Just look up the name Hale." "I don't need a system to know you don't belong in seat 1. Elaine hissed, leaning closer. That seat costs $20,000. You look like you couldn't afford the tax on a bag of peanuts. Move now, or you're going to jail. Behind him, impatient passengers began to murmur as the line stalled. Elaine felt justified. In her mind, she was defending the integrity of the first-class experience. She wasn't being rude. She was doing her job. She was the gatekeeper. "Is there a problem here?" a deep voice asked. It was Mr. Whitman, who had stopped near the entrance to the jet bridge. His gaze rested on Marcus with curiosity rather than hostility. He looked puzzled, not offended. "Just a misunderstanding, Mr. Whitman," Elaine said brightly, slipping back into her polished customer service persona. "This young man seems to believe that a hoodie is acceptable attire for the royal suite. We're taking care of it." Marcus looked at her, a strange spark flickering in his eyes. It wasn't fear. It was the expression of a chess player watching an opponent make a catastrophic move. "Fine," Marcus said calmly. "I'll wait." "You won't wait here," Elaine snapped, pointing a manicured finger toward the general seating area. "Sit over there. Once I finish boarding the actual passengers, I'll deal with you." Marcus didn't protest. He walked over to the plastic chairs and sat down, pulling his phone from his pocket. He didn't look like someone worried about airport police. He looked like someone counting down to something inevitable. 20 minutes later, every first-class and business-class passenger had boarded. Elaine had welcomed each one with warmth and exaggerated respect, complimenting watches, luggage, and jewelry. She felt powerful. She had done her job, kept the riffraff out. The gate area was nearly empty now, except for Marcus and two gate agents who looked increasingly uneasy. One of them, a younger woman, let's call her Nina, leaned toward Elaine and whispered, "Maybe we should just scan it. If it beeps, it beeps. If it doesn't, we call security. The flight closes in 5 minutes." Elaine scoffed. "This is about principle, Nina. If we let people like him even think they can try this, next thing you know, the cabin will look like a subway car." She paused, then smiled thinly. "But fine, let's embarrass him properly." Elaine strode over to Marcus, her heels clicking sharply against the terrazzo floor. "Last chance," she said, looming over him. "Admit it's fake and I'll let you walk away. Try to board, and I call airport police." Marcus stood up, towering over her. "Scan it!" Elaine yanked the boarding pass from his hand and marched back to the podium. She slid it under the scanner with a smug grin, waiting for the red error light. Buzz. Beep. A clean green light flashed. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Hale." Elaine froze. She stared at the screen, blinking in disbelief. The system hadn't just accepted the ticket. It had flagged it as a priority override, a classification she had never seen before. Nina gasped. "It worked! We have to let him on. We need to close the doors." Heat crept up Elaine's neck as her certainty unraveled. Still, her pride wouldn't allow her to retreat. There had to be a glitch, a hack, something. "Fine," Elaine snapped, shoving the pass back into Marcus's chest. "Maybe the system's broken, but don't think for a second you're getting the royal treatment. I'll be watching you." Marcus took the pass and stepped onto the jet bridge. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere was calm and luxurious. Soft jazz played overhead. Warm amber lighting filled the cabin. Marcus turned left toward first class. Elaine hurried ahead of him and blocked the aisle to the exclusive suite. "No," she said quietly, her voice sharp with venom. "You're not sitting there." "My ticket says seat 1A, Marcus replied evenly. "I don't care what the ticket says," Elaine lied, her heart pounding. "That seat is reserved for a diplomat arriving late." The idea of serving caviar and Dom Perignon to a kid in a hoodie offended everything she believed about order. "You can sit in the jump seat in the galley," she continued, "or you can get off the plane. Those are your choices." "The jump seat?" Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. Take it or leave it, Elaine said coldly. I'm the senior purser on this flight. I'm the law. Marcus glanced at the plush leather suite, empty, pristine, then at the narrow fold-down crew seat near the lavatory. He pulled out his phone again. All right, I'll take the jump seat, but I need your name. It's Elaine, she sneered, tapping her gold name badge. Beatrice. Spell it right in your little complaint email. No one reads them anyway. Marcus sat down on the hard, cramped jump seat and buckled the complicated harness. He looked completely out of place, his long frame squeezed into a crew seat while a luxury suite sat empty less than 10 feet away. Passengers were starting to notice. Mr. Whitman lowered his newspaper and looked toward Elaine. Excuse me, he said politely. Is there a reason that young man isn't in his seat? Seat 1A appears to be empty. Elaine smiled and leaned closer, ready to whisper an explanation. Security concerns, sir, Elaine said quietly. We believe the ticket may be fraudulent, but we didn't want to delay departure. We're keeping him contained until we land in Paris, where authorities can handle it. I'm doing this for your safety. Mr. Whitman looked unconvinced, but he said nothing. The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety demonstration began. Elaine deliberately positioned herself directly in front of Marcus during the demo, locking eyes with him during the final cabin check. As she passed, she kicked his duffel bag farther under the seat with her foot. Get comfortable, she muttered mockingly. Marcus didn't look up. He was typing on his phone. The screen was dim, but the contact name at the top was clearly visible. Dad, CEO. The message read, Gate agent laughed at my boarding pass. Denied seat 1. Forced into galley jump seat. Accused me of theft. Her name is Elaine. Plane is taxiing. Handle it. He hit send just as the aircraft turned onto the active runway. The engines surged, pinning everyone back in their seats. Elaine buckled in, satisfied. She had won. She had protected the sanctity of the cabin. The aircraft accelerated, 100 knots, 120. Then something happened, something Elaine had never experienced in her 20 years of flying. The engines suddenly lost power. The roar dropped to a low whine. The brakes slammed hard, throwing Elaine forward against her harness. The plane shuddered violently as the takeoff was aborted, mid-runway. The cabin fell silent. A collective gasp rippled through the passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. It sounded tense, angry. This is Captain Reynolds. We are aborting takeoff. We have received orders from corporate headquarters to return to the gate immediately. Elaine frowned. Corporate headquarters? Why would they be involved? The captain spoke again, and this time his voice shook. We have a security breach involving a member of the crew. Everyone remain seated. Elaine turned slowly toward Marcus. For the first time, he was looking directly at her, and for the first time, he smiled. The silence in the cabin felt heavier than gravity itself. The massive Boeing 787, built to cross oceans with ease, now felt clumsy as it rolled off the runway and onto the taxiway. The engines, once powerful and confident, whined softly, almost like the aircraft itself was disappointed. The moment the seatbelt sign chimed off, Elaine unbuckled and stood, even though the plane was still moving. She smoothed her skirt with sharp, aggressive motions. In her mind, the story was already clear. The captain had realized the threat. An unvetted, dangerous passenger sitting in the galley. The boy in the hoodie. She had been right. She looked down at Marcus, still strapped into the rear-facing jump seat. He looked completely calm, scrolling through a music playlist on his phone, as if he weren't the reason 300 passengers were heading back to New York. I hope you have a good lawyer, Elaine hissed, leaning in close. Her perfume, usually pleasant, felt overwhelming in the tight space. Disrupting a flight crew is a federal offense. That's 10 years. Easy. And for what? A prank? A TikTok stunt? Marcus paused his music and looked up at her, his expression neutral. "I didn't disrupt the crew, Elaine," he said evenly. "I sat where you told me to sit. I haven't said a word." "Your presence is the disruption," she snapped. "Do you even know who's on this plane? Mr. Whitman runs a hedge fund. Mrs. Pembroke in 3F owns half of Manhattan. Their time is worth more than your entire life, and you just wasted an hour of it." She turned sharply and marched into the first-class cabin to contain the fallout. The mood there was close to mutiny. "This is unacceptable," Mrs. Pembroke snapped, slamming her champagne flute onto the tray table. Diamonds glittered at her neck. "I have a dinner in Paris at 8. Why are we turning around?" Elaine put on her most apologetic expression and lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, just loud enough for others to hear. "I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Pembroke," she said. "It's a situation in the galley." She gestured vaguely toward the front of the plane. "The young man. I tried to stop him at the gate. He managed to get on board with a counterfeit ticket. The captain believes it's unsafe to cross the Atlantic with him aboard." "We need to turn back so the marshals can remove him," Elaine said firmly. A wave of outrage rippled through the first-class cabin. "The thug in the hoodie?" Mr. Whitman demanded, his face flushing red. "I knew it. I saw him arguing with you. You should have dragged him off by his ear." "I tried, Mr. Whitman," Elaine replied with a dramatic sigh, playing the role of the burdened professional. "But regulations are so soft these days, we're not allowed to touch passengers." She lowered her voice reassuringly. "Don't worry. Police will be waiting at the jet bridge. Once they handcuff him and take him off, we'll be back in the air. Think of this as a short intermission." She moved down the aisle, collecting empty glasses, subtly feeding the passengers' anger. She wanted witnesses. She wanted Marcus to feel the weight of 100 wealthy eyes as he was dragged away in shame. Back in the galley, Nina, the junior flight attendant, looked ghostly pale. She stood near the cockpit door, holding the interphone handset. She had just spoken to the flight deck. "Elaine," Nina whispered, her voice shaking, "I just talked to Captain Reynolds." "Is he furious?" Elaine asked casually, grabbing a bottle of water. "I'm sure he is. Did he say how many officers are meeting us?" "He didn't mention police," Nina said, biting her lip. "He asked if the passenger in seat 1 was comfortable." Elaine froze. "What?" "He asked if Mr. Hale was comfortable," Nina repeated. "I told him Mr. Hale wasn't in 1A, that he was in the jump seat." Elaine felt her stomach dip. "There was a long silence," Nina continued. "Then he just hung up, slammed the phone down so hard it hurt my ear." Elaine waved her hand dismissively, though it trembled slightly. "He's stressed. He probably assumes we moved him for safety, to keep an eye on him. It's fine. Once we reach the gate, the authorities will handle it, and I'll probably get a commendation for spotting a fraud." The plane finally came to a stop, not just any gate. Gate 17, the airline's primary heavy-lift gate. Through the portal window, Elaine watched the jet bridge extend toward the aircraft. But beyond it, on the tarmac, something caught her attention. For a security incident, she expected police cruisers with flashing lights. There were none. Instead, 3 black SUVs sat parked beside the stairs. Sleek, unmarked, expensive. Government vehicles, or elite private security. "See?" Elaine said smugly, turning toward Marcus. "They brought the feds. You really messed up, kid." Marcus unbuckled his harness and stood, stretching his tall frame in the cramped galley. He lifted his duffel bag. "Elaine," he said quietly, his voice dropping, suddenly sounding much older than 19. "You have a bad habit of judging books by their covers. That's going to be hard to unlearn when you're unemployed." "Sit down!" Elaine shrieked. "You do not stand until police tell you to stand." The fastened seatbelt sign chimed off. The sound of the aircraft door disarming echoed loudly in the now silent cabin. Elaine straightened herself, smoothing her hair. She positioned herself directly in front of the door, ready to brief the officers the moment they stepped inside. She rehearsed her line. "Officer, the suspect was aggressive and refused crew instructions." The heavy door swung open. Elaine opened her mouth, but no words came out. Standing in the jet bridge was not a police officer. It was a man wearing a charcoal three-piece Italian suit. He appeared to be in his 60s, with steel gray hair and a face carved from stone. Authority radiated from him like heat. It was Victor Langford. Elaine gasped. Everyone at Apex Skies Airlines knew that name. Victor Langford was the Regional Director of Operations for all of North America. He answered only to the Global Board. He was known for firing station managers over dust on podiums. Behind him stood two men, one holding a tablet, the other a briefcase. And behind them, pale and furious, stood the station manager, Mr. Caldwell, who looked close to vomiting. Elaine's thoughts spiraled. They sent him for a ticket fraud? This kid must be a master criminal, a hacker, someone dangerous. "Mr. Langford," Elaine said quickly, stepping forward and extending her hand. "I'm relieved you're here. The situation has been contained. The suspect is in the galley. I kept him—" Mr. Langford didn't shake her hand. He didn't even look at her. He looked straight through her, as if she didn't exist. He stepped past her into the galley with focused precision and stopped directly in front of Marcus. The cabin was dead silent. Mr. Whitman and the other first-class passengers leaned forward, eager to witness the arrest. Mr. Langford bowed. Not a casual nod. A formal, unmistakably respectful bow. "Mr. Hale," Langford said, his voice heavy with genuine shame. "On behalf of the entire Apex Skies executive team, I offer my deepest and most sincere apologies. This is a catastrophic failure of our standards." The blood drained from Elaine's face. Her knees nearly buckled, and she grabbed the edge of the galley counter to keep herself upright. Marcus didn't react emotionally. He simply looked at Langford, his expression firm. "Victor," Marcus said calmly. He knew his name. "My father always said you ran a tight ship," Marcus continued. "Today, that ship felt more like a leaky canoe." "We are investigating the entire chain of failure immediately," Langford replied, sweat forming along his hairline despite the cool air. "Your father is currently on a secure line in the cockpit. Captain Reynolds is waiting for you." "My father?" Elaine squeaked before she could stop herself. Langford finally turned toward her. His eyes were cold and lifeless, like a shark's. "Senior Purser Elaine Carter," he said, not bothering to glance at her name badge. "Do you know who this is?" Elaine shook her head, unable to speak. "This," Langford announced loudly, projecting his voice into the first-class cabin so everyone could hear, "is Jaden Hale. He is the only son of Reginald Hale, founder and majority shareholder of Apex Skies Airlines." The words hit like a shockwave. "This young man owns the aircraft you're standing on. He owns the uniform you're wearing. Technically, Miss Carter, he owns the very air you're breathing right now." The silence was absolute. Mr. Whitman let his newspaper slip from his hands. Mrs. Pembroke stared, her mouth hanging open. Marcus looked back at Elaine. The image she had labeled a thug was gone. Standing there was the heir to a multi-billion-dollar aviation empire. "I tried to tell her," Marcus said calmly to Langford. "I gave her my name. I told her to scan the ticket. She laughed at me because I was wearing a hoodie." He continued evenly. "She said I belonged in economy. When the system cleared me, she still denied me my seat, seat 1A, which I paid for, and forced me into the crew jump seat." Langford's face darkened to an alarming shade of purple. He turned sharply to the station manager. "Is this true?" he demanded. We reviewed the security footage, sir," Caldwell stammered, staring at the floor. Miss Carter threw the boarding pass at him. She humiliated him publicly at the gate. And, Marcus added, crossing his arms, she told the other passengers I was a criminal. She turned them against me. At that moment, the cockpit door opened. Captain Reynolds stepped out. With 4 stripes on his shoulders and 20 years of experience, he was a seasoned pilot. But now he looked shaken. He walked straight to Marcus. "Mr. Hale," the captain said thickly. "I had no idea. When I saw the manifest update showing your VIP status, I assumed you were seated comfortably in 1A. When I received a message from your father asking why his son was in a jump seat." He shot Elaine a look filled with pure contempt. "I turned the plane around immediately. I will not fly the owner's son like cargo." Elaine finally found her voice. It came out cracked and weak. I didn't know. He was dressed like, he looked like..." "Like what?" Marcus stepped closer. "Say it, Elaine. What did I look like?" She couldn't answer. The racism, the classism, the bias, all of it hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. "You judged me," Marcus said quietly. "You decided my worth based on my clothes and my skin. You didn't check the manifest. You didn't do your job. You just wanted to feel powerful." He turned back to Langford. "I want my seat now. 1A. I have a meeting in Paris." "Of course, sir," Langford said instantly. But Marcus raised a finger. "I don't want to fly with this crew," he said, pointing directly at Elaine. "And I don't think she should be wearing that uniform anymore. It represents excellence. She represents ignorance." Langford nodded once, sharply. He turned to Elaine. "Miss Carter, hand over your badge and identification. You are relieved of duty effective immediately. You will be escorted off this aircraft." "But how will you get to Paris?" Elaine sobbed, mascara streaking down her face. "You're short-staffed. You can't fly without a minimum crew." Marcus smiled. It was calm and cold. "Don't worry about that. My father planned ahead. Look out the window." Elaine turned. Another set of stairs was approaching the rear of the plane. A fresh flight crew, 10 attendants in pristine uniforms, was marching across the tarmac. They had been pulled from reserve and rushed in by the black SUVs. "You're not just fired," Marcus said evenly. "You're being replaced, right now, in front of everyone." Langford gestured toward the open door. "Get off the plane, Miss Carter." Elaine looked toward the first-class cabin. The passengers she had flattered, the people she believed were her peers, were all staring back at her in silence. They weren't looking at her with sympathy. They were staring at her with disgust. She had delayed them. She had offended the owner. In their eyes now, she was the riffraff. "Walk of shame," Marcus murmured softly, repeating her earlier words. "Enjoy it." Elaine reached up and unpinned her wings, the gold insignia she had spent 10 years earning. Her hands shook so badly that the pin slipped, piggerying her finger. A drop of blood stained the front of her white blouse. She handed the wings to Langford, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the aircraft door. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, applause broke out. It started with Marcus. Then Mr. Whitman joined in, then Mrs. Pembroke. Within seconds, the entire first-class cabin was clapping as she left the plane. But the nightmare wasn't finished. As Elaine stumbled forward, tears blurring her vision, she realized she wasn't just exiting an aircraft. She was walking straight into a media storm. The distance from Gate 17 to the exit of locations places JFK, John F. Kennedy International Airport. Liberty International Airport Terminal B was barely half a mile, but it felt like a death march through glass and steel. She had assumed she'd slip away quietly, that once she left the plane, the incident would end. She had forgotten the one force that now controls modern life: the smartphone. When she emerged from the jet bridge, clutching her purse and what remained of her dignity, the waiting area felt wrong. No one was reading or watching luggage. People were hunched over their screens, whispering. A teenager near the podium glanced up, recognized her, and nudged his friend. "That's her," he said. That's the Karen from the video. Elaine kept her head down and walked faster. Her heels, once a sound of authority, now clicked like a countdown timer. She dug into her purse for her phone, planning to call an Uber. When she unlocked the screen, her breath caught. Her notifications weren't a list. They were a blur. Missed calls from unknown numbers, texts from friends, alerts from Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram stacking faster than she could read. She opened the first link sent by a horrified colleague. It was a TikTok video. The caption screamed in bold red letters, "Apex Skies, purser humiliates owner's son. Gets instant karma." Elaine hit play. Her stomach dropped. The video was crystal clear, filmed from a perfect angle, likely by the passenger who'd been standing behind Marcus in the priority line. It showed everything: her laughter, her tone, the words captured perfectly. "You look like you couldn't afford the tax on a bag of peanuts." It showed her throwing the boarding pass. It showed Marcus's calm, restrained response. But it didn't stop there. The video had been stitched with a second clip, footage from inside the aircraft. Mr. Whitman had apparently recorded the confrontation in the aisle when Elaine forced Marcus into the jump seat. The timestamp read, "Posted 20 minutes ago. Views, 4.5 million. Nausea surged through her. She stumbled into the nearest women's restroom and locked herself into a stall. Sitting on the closed toilet lid, her hands shook violently as she scrolled through the comments. User 82. "I've flown with her. She was rude to my elderly mother last year. Glad she finally messed with the wrong one." Aviation Geek. "Turning a 787 around Mid-Runway costs like $50K in fuel alone. She's finished." Emily Jenkins. "Imagine being this racist. Cost your airline a fortune and got fired by the owner's son." Elaine didn't feel remorse. She felt panic. She was a survivor. She had climbed her way up by being ruthless, and she wasn't about to let one incident destroy her life. "They edited it," she whispered to herself. "They took it out of context." She opened her own social media apps, determined to control the narrative. She would explain. She would cry on camera. She would claim protocol. She would paint herself as the victim of a spoiled, entitled rich kid. She began typing a Facebook post. "Today I was terminated for doing my job. I was protecting my passengers from a potential security threat. The individual refused to properly identify himself." She hit post. Within seconds, the backlash hit like a swarm. Comment 1. "He handed you his boarding pass. The video shows you throwing it on the floor. Stop lying." Comment 2. "We saw the footage, Elaine. You're done." Comment 3. "My cousin works JFK Ops. The manifest was clear. You just didn't like his hoodie." Then came the doxing. Someone shared her LinkedIn profile. Another posted her salary. Hashtags exploded. Yash Boycott Apex Skies began trending, with users demanding the airline confirm she wouldn't receive a pension. Elaine stared at her phone, the screen glowing mercilessly. The power she once wielded was gone, and the internet had decided her verdict. Her phone rang again. This time it was a number she recognized, her union representative. "Dennis." "Dennis," Elaine said quickly, forcing calm into her voice. "Thank God. You have to help me. They fired me without a hearing. That's a violation of Article 12. We need to file a grievance immediately. I want back pay, and I want to sue for defamation." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Elaine," Dennis finally said, his tone flat and distant. "I've seen the video." "It's edited," she snapped. "It's completely out of context." "Stop," Dennis cut in sharply. "I also spoke with Mr. Langford and with the captain." Elaine's chest tightened. "You violated the Civil Rights Act," Dennis continued, "the Passenger Bill of Rights, and roughly 50 company policies. You profiled a passenger. You ignored a valid boarding pass." "I pay union dues," Elaine shouted. "You have to defend me. The union protects members from wrongful termination." "This wasn't wrongful," Dennis replied. "And Apex Skies just released a press statement. They're publicly distancing themselves from you to protect their stock price. They're calling your actions rogue behavior." He exhaled. "We can't touch this, Lane. You're on your own. Don't call this office again." The line went dead. Elaine sat in the airport restroom stall, the automatic toilet flushing behind her. She was alone, but the real horror wasn't the silence. It was the voices outside the door. 2 cleaning women were talking. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "That was Mr. Hale's son." "I heard he gave every passenger on that flight a $5,000 voucher," the other replied, "and invited the new crew to dinner in Paris. That boy has class." "Yeah," the first woman said, "unlike that witch who worked the gate." Elaine realized she couldn't even leave the bathroom. Her face was everywhere. 3 weeks later, her apartment sat in darkness. Curtains drawn, pizza boxes and unopened mail cluttered the coffee table. Elaine hadn't stepped outside in nearly 20 days. She had hoped the storm would pass. It hadn't. It had settled into her life and drowned everything she'd built. She applied to Sky North Airlines. Rejected. American. Rejected. ValueJet. Summit Air. Even a tiny charter cargo outfit in Montana. Rejected. 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 Her name had been flagged in the aviation industry reference system. Reason for separation, gross misconduct, security risk, high liability. She wasn't just fired. She was unemployable in the sky. But Elaine wasn't ready to surrender. She was furious. She believed she was the victim of a corporate machine. She found a lawyer, a strip mall attorney named Martin Feldman, no relation to the TV character, just a greasy man named Martin. Martin promised her a payout. "Rich companies hate bad press," he told her. "We sue for wrongful termination and emotional distress. Ask for $5 million. They'll settle for $1 million just to make it go away." Today was her meeting at Martin's office. She wore her best suit, though it hung loose now. Stress had taken its toll. She drove wearing oversized sunglasses to avoid recognition. When she walked into Martin's office, he wasn't smiling. He was sweating. A thick stack of documents sat on his desk, freshly couriered. "We have a problem," Martin said, dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. "What problem?" Elaine asked, sitting down. "They offer a settlement?" "Not exactly." Martin slid a heavy document across the desk. It was bound in thick legal paper, Apex Skies' logo embossed in gold. "This is a countersuit," Martin said. Elaine laughed nervously. "For what? Hurt feelings?" "No," Martin replied grimly. "For damages." He leaned forward. "Do you know how much it costs to abort a takeoff on a Boeing wide-body aircraft?" Elaine blinked. "I don't know. A few thousand?" "Try again." Martin flipped to page 12. "Fuel dump to reach safe landing weight, $42,000. Runway penalties from the Port Authority for blocking an active runway, $25,000. Passenger compensation vouchers issued by Mr. Hale, $1.5 million. Emergency crew replacement logistics, $15,000. He pointed to the bottom line. Total damages sought, $1,682,000. Martin lowered his voice. "They're suing you for $1.6 million. Elaine felt the room tilt. "And because they're citing malice and gross negligence," Martin continued, "you're not protected by the corporate liability shield. The video proves discriminatory intent. You're personally liable." Elaine's mouth went dry. "I don't have $1 million, she whispered. The words hung in the air, and for the first time since Gate 17, there was no one left to blame. I have $40,000 in my 401k, Elaine stammered. "There's more," Martin said quietly. He looked genuinely afraid. "The Hale family's legal team doesn't play around. They filed a motion this morning to freeze your assets pending trial." Elaine stared at him. "Your bank accounts are locked," Martin continued. Your credit cards are frozen?" Elaine jumped to her feet. "They can't do that." "They can," Martin said grimly, "and they already have." "They're claiming you're a flight risk," he added. "Ironic, I know." Martin closed the folder and leaned back. "Elaine, I can't represent you. I handle slip and fall cases. These people are sharks. They'll destroy me. You need a corporate defense firm, and that'll cost at least $50,000 just to get started." "I can't pay that," Elaine cried. "My accounts are frozen." "Then I suggest you leave," Martin said, standing up. "And Elaine, if I were you, I'd sell the car. You're going to need the cash, even for bus fare." Elaine walked out of the office into the blinding afternoon sun. She headed straight for her car, her Mercedes C-Class, her pride, her proof that she mattered. She pressed the unlock button. Nothing. She pressed it again. Still nothing. A tow truck rolled up in front of her car. A large man in a jumpsuit climbed out and began attaching chains to the bumper. "Hey!" Elaine shouted, rushing over. "What are you doing? That's my car!" The man glanced at his clipboard. "Elaine Carter?" "Yes." "Repo order," he said flatly. "Bank recalled the loan. Something about frozen assets and breach of credit terms. Step back, ma'am." "You can't take it," Elaine pleaded. "I need it to get home." "Not my problem," the man replied. The Mercedes lifted off the ground. Through the rear window, Elaine saw her spare uniform hanging in the back seat. The gold wings swung gently, catching the sunlight one last time. Then the car disappeared down the street. Elaine stood on the sidewalk, stunned. She reached into her purse for her phone, to call someone, anyone. The screen was black. Dead battery. She hadn't charged it. She looked around. She was 10 miles from home. No car, no access to money, no job, no reputation. She looked down at her feet. She was wearing expensive flight attendant heels, 3 inches of Italian leather meant for first-class aisles, not cracked city pavement. She tried to walk and stumbled. A city bus pulled up to the curb, loud, crowded, smelling of exhaust. The sign on the front read, "Downtown." Elaine remembered the words she had thrown at Marcus. "This isn't a bus ticket, kid." She reached into her pocket and found a crumpled $5 bill she'd shoved in there days earlier. Elaine Carter, the queen of Gate 17, the woman who sneered at hoodies and headphones, crossed the street slowly. She climbed onto the bus, her heels clicking awkwardly against the metal steps. "Exact change only," the driver grunted without looking up. She fed the bill into the machine. No change. She moved down the aisle. There were no empty seats. She stood, gripping a greasy handrail as the bus lurched forward. Out the window, she watched a plane streak across the sky. Silver, effortless, heading somewhere expensive, somewhere Lanutiful. She wasn't on it. And with a heavy certainty, she knew she never would be again. 1 year later, the National Express bus terminal in Hoboken, New Jersey, smelled of diesel fumes, stale popcorn, and exhaustion. It couldn't have been further from the lavender-scented marble lounge of JFK's locations, Places JFK, John F. Kennedy International Airport, Liberty International Airport Terminal B. But this was Elaine's world now. She sat behind a scratched plexiglass window, wearing a polyester uniform 2 sizes too large. The name badge on her chest didn't say Senior Purser. It simply read, Elaine. Her voice was rough when she spoke. Stress had aged her. She looked a decade older. Her hair, once perfectly twisted, was pulled into a messy, graying ponytail. A young woman stepped up, snapping gum loudly. She slapped a wad of crumpled bills onto the counter. 1 ticket to Cape May, one way. "That'll be $28, Elaine said, typing slowly on the outdated keyboard. "You're $2 short." "Seriously?" the girl scoffed. "It's $2. Just print the ticket, lady. You're holding up the line." Elaine looked at her. Really looked at her. And for a brief moment, she understood exactly how the story had ended the way it did. Elaine felt a brief flare of her old fire. For a moment, she wanted to scream. She wanted to tell this girl that she once poured champagne for diplomats, that she used to command a cabin of 300 people, that she had once held authority in the sky itself. But she said nothing. She couldn't. After the lawsuit, Elaine had lost everything. The court ruled entirely in Apex Skies' favor. She was forced to liquidate her retirement account, sell her condo, and declare bankruptcy just to cover a fraction of the damages. The airline industry blacklisted her so completely that she couldn't even get hired at an airport gift shop. "I need the $2, ma'am," Elaine whispered, lowering her eyes. "Store policy." The girl scoffed, rummaged through her purse, and tossed 2 crumpled bills against the glass. "Pathetic," she muttered. "Get a real job." Elaine printed the ticket and slid it under the window. The girl snatched it and walked away without another glance. Elaine caught her reflection in the scratched plexiglass. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Bitter, worn down, small. With a sinking realization, she understood that she had become exactly what she once mocked, someone stuck in a life with no altitude. Her brake bell sounded. Elaine picked up her plastic container of leftover pasta and walked to the cramped employee break room in the back. A small, dusty television hung crookedly in the corner, permanently tuned to the news. She sat and ate mechanically. On the screen, the anchor spoke with excitement. "And in business news tonight, Apex Skies Airlines reports record profits this quarter, driven by its rebrand as the Airline of Inclusivity. We now go live to company headquarters for a special announcement from the youngest member of the board of directors." Elaine stopped chewing. She looked up. There he was. Marcus Hale stood at a podium surrounded by flashing cameras. He looked different than he had on the plane. He wore a tailored suit that fit his tall frame perfectly, but on his feet were rare vintage Jordans, now a signature of the airline's relaxed new dress code. He looked confident, grounded, powerful. Beside him stood his father, Reginald Hale, and Victor Langford. But it was clear who was in charge. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice steady through the television speakers. "A year ago, I boarded a flight and was told I didn't belong. I was judged by my appearance instead of my character. That moment was painful, but it was necessary. It exposed a culture that needed to change." Elaine felt her throat tighten. He was talking about her. She was the villain in his origin story. "Today," Marcus continued, "I'm proud to announce the Clear Path Initiative. Apex Skies is committing $50 million to fund flight school scholarships for underprivileged youth. We want the pilot in the cockpit, the engineer in the hangar, and the executive in the boardroom to reflect the world we serve." Applause erupted on the screen. Marcus smiled. "We're also retiring the old priority boarding system that separated people by status. From now on, we board by efficiency, not elitism, because at 30,000 feet, we're all just human beings trying to get home." The camera panned across the crowd. Elaine's breath caught. There was Nina, the junior flight attendant who had tried to warn her. Nina now wore the gold wings of a senior purser. She looked confident, happy. She was clapping harder than anyone. Tears blurred Elaine's vision. Nina had been promoted. The airline was thriving. Marcus was celebrated. And Elaine was sitting in a bus terminal break room, eating cold pasta. The break room door swung open. Her manager, Gary, a gruff man with a permanent scowl, stuck his head inside. "Hey, Lane, break's over. Bus from Philly just pulled in. It's packed. Get back to the window." I just need a minute," Elaine said softly, wiping her eyes. "No minutes," Gary snapped. "You're on the clock. If you can't handle it, I've got a stack of applications from people who can." He paused. "You're replaceable, Lane." The words landed hard. They echoed the same truth Marcus had delivered when he replaced an entire crew without hesitation. The cruelty wasn't just that she'd lost everything, it was that she now lived under the same cold, indifferent system she once wielded so proudly. Elaine stood. She walked back to her booth, and the line kept moving. Elaine sat down behind the glass. A line of exhausted, irritated travelers was already forming. They wore hoodies. They had headphones around their necks. They carried worn duffel bags slung over their shoulders. A year ago, she would have sneered at them. She would have judged every detail. Now she looked at the young man standing at the front of the line. He looked a lot like Marcus. "Ticket to D.C., he said, glancing down at his phone. Elaine took a slow breath. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't sigh. Instead, she spoke quietly, her voice steady but softened by something new. "Right away, sir," she said. "Have a safe trip." It was a small change. Too small to save her career, too late to recover her fortune, too late to undo the past. But as the printer whirred and a bus ticket slid out, just a bus ticket for a person who mattered as much as anyone else, Elaine finally understood the lesson she should have learned long ago. Altitude doesn't make you superior. A uniform doesn't make you better. How you treat people when you think no one is watching, that is the only status that counts. Somewhere above the gray Newark clouds, Flight RH-88 cruised toward Paris, piloted by a diverse crew and carrying passengers treated with dignity. It left Elaine far behind, grounded in the life she had built for herself. And that is how one moment of arrogance ended a career forever. Elaine believed she was the gatekeeper of the elite. She learned the truth the hard way. Real class has nothing to do with the price of your ticket. It's about the content of your character. She ended up exactly where she once told Marcus he belonged, while he rose to heights she would never reach. It's a brutal reminder that when you try to humiliate others, you're often just writing the opening chapter of your own downfall. I hope you enjoyed this story of justice served cold. If you believe everyone deserves respect, no matter what they wear or how they look, please hit the like button. It truly helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story where karma comes full circle. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder to be kind. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.